to Virgo Potens. I invite you to give this video a like and to subscribe to my channel. YouTube has introduced a great feature called Super Thanks. If you enjoy this video, you can support my work or say thank you by clicking on the Super Thanks icon. It's similar to offering support through a super chat. The following Virgo Potens production is a narrated video of a sermon by St. Alphonsus Liguori, narrated by Tony Capobianco. 21st Sunday after Pentecost, on the eternity of hell. And his Lord, being angry, delivered him to the torture until he paid all the debt. Matthew 18:34. In this day's gospel, we find that a certain servant, having badly administered the affairs of his master, was found to owe him a debt of 10,000 talents. The master demanded payment, but the servant, falling down, said, "Have patience, and I will pay thee all." The master took pity on him, and forgave the entire debt. One of his fellow servants, who owed him 100 pence, besought him to have patience, and promised to pay him the last farthing. But the wicked servant cast him into prison. Hearing of this act of cruelty to his fellow servant, the master sent for him and said to him, "Wicked servant, I have forgiven thee 10,000 talents, and for a debt of 100 pence thou hast refused to show compassion to thy fellow servant." He then delivered him to the tortures till he paid all the debt. Behold, dearly beloved brethren, in these last words, a description of the sentence of the eternal death which is prepared for sinners. By dying in sin, they die debtors to God for all their iniquities, and being unable to make any satisfaction in the other life for their past sins, they remain forever debtors to the divine justice, and must suffer for eternity in hell. Of this miserable eternity I will speak today. Listen to me with attention. The thought of eternity is a great thought. So it was called by St. Augustine, Magna Cogitatio. According to the Holy Doctor, God has made us Christians and instructed us in the maxims of faith that we may think of eternity. We are Christians that we may always think of the world to come. This thought has driven from the world so many of the nobles of the earth, has made them renounce all their riches, and shut themselves up in the cloister, there to live in poverty and penance. This thought has sent so many young men into caves and deserts, and has animated so many martyrs to embrace torments and death, in order to save their souls for eternity. "For," exclaims St. Paul, "we have not here a lasting city, but we seek one that is to come." Hebrews 13:14. This earth, dearly beloved Christians, is not our country. It is for us a place of passage, through which we must soon pass to the house of eternity. Man shall go into the house of his eternity. Ecclesiastes 12:5. In this eternity the house of the just, which is a palace of delights, is very different from the house of sinners, which is a dungeon of torments. Into one of these two houses each of us must certainly go. St. Ambrose says, "Into this or that eternity I must fall. And where the soul shall first go, there she shall remain forever. If the tree fall to the south or to the north, in what place soever it shall fall, there shall it lie." Ecclesiastes 11:3. On what side does a tree fall when it is cut down? It falls on the side to which it inclines. On what side, brethren, will you fall when death shall cut down the tree of your life? You will fall on the side to which you incline. If you shall be found inclining to the south, that is, in favor with God, you shall be forever happy. But if you will fall to the north, you must be forever miserable. There is no middle place. You must be forever happy in heaven, or overwhelmed with despair in hell. We must all die, says St. Bernard or some other author, but we know not which of the two eternities shall be our lot after death. This uncertainty about his lot for eternity was the constant subject of the thoughts of David. It deprived his eyes of sleep, and kept him always in terror. My eyes prevented the watches. I was troubled, and I spoke not. I thought upon the days of old, and I had in my mind the eternal years. Psalm 76, 5, 6. What, says Saint Cyprian, has encouraged the saints to lead a life which, on account of their continual austerities, was an uninterrupted martyrdom? It was, he answers, the thought of eternity that inspired them with courage to submit to such unceasing rigors. A certain monk shut himself in a cave and did nothing else than constantly exclaim, "Eternity! Eternity!" The famous sinner converted by the abbot Paphnutius kept eternity always before her eyes, and was accustomed to say, "Who can assure me of a happy eternity, and that I will not fall into a miserable eternity?" The same uncertainty kept St. Andrew Avellino in continual terrors and tears till his last breath. Hence he used to ask every one he met, "What do you say? Shall I be saved or damned for eternity?" Oh, that we too had eternity always before our eyes! We certainly should not be so much attached to the world. He who fixes his thoughts on eternity is not elated by prosperity nor dejected by adversity, because, having nothing to desire in this world, he has nothing to fear. He desires only a happy eternity, and he fears only a miserable eternity. A certain lady, who was greatly attached to the world, went one day to confession to Father M.D. Avila. He bid her go home and reflect on these two words, always and never. She obeyed, took away her affections from the world, and consecrated them to God. St. Augustine says that the man who thinks on eternity and is not converted to God either has no faith or has lost his reason. O eternity, he who thinks on thee and does not repent has certainly no faith or has lost his heart. Hence, St. Chrysostom relates that the pagans upbraided the Christians with being liars or fools. Liars, if they said they believed what they did not believe. Fools, if they believed in eternity and committed sin. Woe to sinners, says St. Caesarius. They enter into eternity without having known it. But their woes shall be doubled when they shall have entered into eternity and shall never be able to leave. To those who enter hell, the door opens for their admission, but never opens for their departure. I have the keys of death and of hell. Apocalypse 1:18. God himself keeps the keys of hell, to show us that whosoever enters has no hope of ever escaping from it. St. John Chrysostom writes that the condemnation of the reprobate is engraved on the pillar of eternity, so that it never shall be revoked. In hell there is no calendar. There the years are not counted. St. Antonin says that if a damned soul heard that she was to be released from hell after so many millions of years as there are drops of water in the sea, or grains of sand in the earth, she would feel a greater joy than a criminal condemned to death would experience at hearing that he was reprieved, and was to be made the monarch of the whole world. But no. As many millions of years shall pass away as there are drops of water in the ocean, or grains of dust in the earth, and the hell of the damned shall be at its commencement. All these millions of years shall be multiplied an infinite number of times, and hell will begin again. But of what use is it, says St. Hilary, to count years in eternity? Where you expect the end, there it commences. And St. Augustine says that things which have an end cannot be compared with eternity. In Psalm 36, each of the damned would be content to make this compact with God. Lord, increase my torments as much as thou pleasest. Assign a term for them as distant as thou pleasest, provided thou fix a time at which they shall cease. I am satisfied. But no, this time shall never arrive. My end, the damned shall say, is perished. Lamentations 3:18. Then is there no end to the torments of the damned? No, the trumpet of divine justice sounds in the caverns of hell, and continually reminds the reprobate that their hell shall be eternal, and shall never have an end. If hell were not eternal, it would not be so frightful a chastisement. Thomas A. Kempis says that everything which passes with time is trifling and short. Any pain which has an end is not very appalling. The man who labors under an imposthume or a cancer must submit to the knife or the cautery. The pain is severe, but because it is soon over it can be borne. But a toothache which lasts for 3 months without interruption is insupportable. Were a person obliged to lie in the same position for 6 months on a soft bed, or even to hear the same music, or the same comedy, night and day for 1 year, he would fall into melancholy and despondency. Poor blind sinners! When threatened with hell they say, "If I go there, I must have patience." But they shall not say so when they will have entered that region of woes, where they must suffer, not by listening to the same music or the same comedy, nor by lying in the same posture, or by toothache, but by enduring all torments and all evils. I will heap evils upon them. Deuteronomy 33:23. And all these torments shall never end. They shall never end, and shall never be diminished in the smallest degree. The damned must forever suffer the same fire, the same privation of God, the same sadness, the same despair. Yes, says Saint Cyprian, in eternity there is no change, because the decree is immutable. This thought shall immensely increase their sufferings, by making them feel beforehand and at each moment all that they shall have to suffer for eternity. In this description of the happiness of the saints and the misery of the reprobate, the prophet Daniel says, "They shall wake some unto life everlasting, and some unto reproach to see it always." Daniel 12:2. They shall always see their unhappy eternity. Thus eternity tortures each of the damned not only by his present pains, but with all his future sufferings, which are eternal. These are not opinions controverted among theologians. They are dogmas of faith clearly revealed in the sacred scriptures. "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire." Matthew 25:41. Some will say, the fire, but not the punishment of the damned, is everlasting. Such the language of the incredulous, but it is folly. For what other purpose would God make this fire eternal, than to chastise the reprobate, who are immortal? But to take away every shadow of doubt, the Scriptures, in many other places, say that not only the fire, but the punishment of the damned is eternal. "And these," says Jesus Christ, "shall go into everlasting punishment." Matthew 25:46. Again we read in St. Mark, "Where the worm dieth not, and the fire is not extinguished." Mark 9:43. St. John says, "And the smoke of their torments shall ascend up for ever and ever." Apocalypse 16:11. "Who," says St. Paul, "shall suffer eternal punishment in destruction." 2 Thessalonians 1:9. Another infidel will ask, how can God justly punish with eternal torments a sin that lasts but a moment? I answer that the grievousness of a crime is measured not by its duration, but by the enormity of its malice. The malice of mortal sin is, as St. Thomas says, infinite. Hence, the damned deserve infinite punishment, and because a creature is not capable of suffering pains infinite in point of intensity, God, as the Holy Doctor says, renders the punishment of the damned infinite in extension by making it eternal. Moreover, it is just that as long as the sinner remains in his sin, the punishment which he deserves should continue. And therefore, as the virtue of the saints is rewarded in heaven, because it lasts forever, so also the guilt of the damned in hell, because it is everlasting, shall be chastised with everlasting torments. The cause of their perverse will continues. Therefore, their chastisement will never have an end. The damned are so obstinate in their sins that even if God offered pardon, their hatred for him would make them refuse it. The prophet Jeremiah, speaking in the name of the reprobate, says, "Why is my sorrow become perpetual, and my wound desperate, so as to refuse to be healed?" Jeremiah 15:18. My wound, they say, is incurable because I do not wish it to be healed. Now, how can God heal the wound of their perverse will, when they would refuse the remedy were it offered to them? Hence, the punishment of the reprobate is called a sword, a vengeance which is irrevocable. I, the Lord, have drawn my sword out of its sheath, not to be turned back. Ezekiel 21:5. Death, which is so terrible in this life, is desired in hell by the damned, but they shall never find it. And in these days men shall seek death, and shall not find it, and they shall desire to die, and death shall fly from them. Apocalypse 11:6. They would wish, as a remedy for their eternal ruin, to be exterminated and destroyed. But there is no poison of destruction in them. Wisdom 1:14. If a man condemned to die be not deprived of life by the first stroke of the axe, his torture moves the people to pity. Miserable damned souls! They live in continual death in the midst of the pains of hell. Death excites in them all the agony of death, but does not give them a remedy by taking away life. St. Augustine says that the first death expels from the body the soul of a sinner who is unwilling to die, but the second death, that is, eternal death, retains in the body a soul that wishes to die. They are laid in hell like sheep. Death shall feed upon them. Psalm 49:14. In feeding, sheep eat the blades of grass, but leave the root untouched. Hence, the grass dies not, but grows up again. It is thus that death treats the damned. It torments them with pain, but spares their life, which may be called the root of suffering. But if these miserable souls have no chance of release from hell, perhaps they can at least deceive or flatter themselves with the hope that God may one day be moved to pity and free them from their torments. No, in hell there is no delusion, no flattery, no perhaps. The damned are as certain as they are of God's existence that their hell shall have no end. Thou thoughtest unjustly that I shall be like to thee, but I will reprove thee, and set before thy face. Psalm 50:21. They shall forever see before their eyes their sins and the sentence of their eternal condemnation, and I will set before thy face. Let us conclude. Thus, most beloved brethren, the affair of our eternal salvation should be the sole object of all our concerns. The business for which we struggle, says St. Eucharius, is eternity. There is question of eternity. There is question whether we will be saved and be forever happy in a city of delights, or be damned and confined for eternity in a pit of fire. This is not an affair of little importance. It is of the utmost and of eternal importance to us. When Thomas More was condemned to death by Henry VIII, his wife Louisa went to him for the purpose of tempting him to obey the royal command. "Tell me, Louisa," replied the holy man, "how many years can I, who am so old, expect to live?" "You might," said she, "live for 20 years. "Oh, foolish woman," he exclaimed, "do you want me to condemn my soul to an eternity of torments for 20 years of life? O God, Christians believe in the existence of hell and commit sin. Dearly beloved brethren, let us not also be fools, like so many who are now weeping in hell. Miserable beings! What benefit do they now derive from all the pleasures which they enjoyed in this life? Speaking of the rich and of the poor, St. John Chrysostom said, "Unhappy felicity, which has drawn the rich into eternal infelicity. O happy infelicity, which has brought the poor to the felicity of eternity." The saints have buried themselves alive in this life, that after death they may not find themselves buried in hell for all eternity. If eternity were a doubtful matter, we ought even then make every effort in our power to escape an eternity of torments. But no, it is not a matter of doubt. It is a truth of faith, that after this life each of us must go into eternity to be forever in glory or forever in despair. Saint Teresa says that it is through a want of faith that so many Christians are lost. As often as we say the words of the Creed, life everlasting, let us enliven our faith and remember that there is another life which never ends, and let us adopt all the means necessary to secure a happy eternity. Let us do all and give up all. If necessary, let us leave the world in order to secure eternal happiness. As Saint Bernard says, when eternity is at stake, no security can be too great. Sermon 8, Third Sunday after the Epiphany, on the Remorse of the Damned. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into the exterior darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 8:12. In the gospel of this day, it is related that, when Jesus Christ entered into Capernaum, there came to him a centurion beseeching him to cure his servant who lay sick of the palsy. Jesus answered, "I will come and heal him." "No," replied the centurion, "I am not worthy that thou shouldst enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant shall be healed." Seeing the centurion's faith, the Redeemer instantly consoled him by restoring health to his servant, and, turning to his disciples, he said, "Many shall come from the east and the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into the exterior darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." By these words our Lord wished to signify that many persons born in infidelity shall be saved, and enjoy the society of the saints, and that many who are born in the bosom of the church shall be cast into hell, where the worm of conscience by its gnawing shall make them weep bitterly for all eternity. Let us examine the remorses of conscience which a damned Christian shall suffer in hell. First remorse, arising from the thought of the little which he required to do in order to save his soul. Second remorse, arising from the remembrance of the trifles for which he lost his soul. Third remorse, arising from the knowledge of the great good which he has lost through his own fault. Of the first remorse of the damned Christian, arising from the thought of the little which he required to do in order to save his soul. A damned soul once appeared to Saint Hubert and said that 2 remorses were her most cruel executioners in hell. The thought of the little which was necessary for her to have done in this life to secure her salvation, and the thought of the trifles for which she brought herself to eternal misery. The same thing has been said by St. Thomas. Speaking of the reprobate, he says, "They shall be in sorrow principally because they are damned for nothing, and because they could most easily have obtained eternal life." Let us stop to consider this first source of remorse, that is, how few and transitory are the pleasures for which all the damned are lost. Each of the reprobate will say for eternity, "If I abstained from such a gratification, if in certain circumstances I overcame human respect, if I avoided such an occasion of sin, such a companion, I should not now be damned. If I had frequented some pious sodality, if I had gone to confession every week, If in temptations I had recommended myself to God, I would not have relapsed into sin. I have so often proposed to do these things, but I have not done them. I began to practice these means of salvation, but afterwards gave them up, and thus I am lost. This torment of the damned will be increased by the remembrance of the good example given them by some young companions who led a chaste and pious life, even in the midst of the world. It will be still more increased by the recollection of all the gifts which the Lord had bestowed upon them, that by their cooperation they might acquire eternal salvation. The gifts of nature, health, riches, respectability of family, talents, all gifts granted by God, not to be employed in the indulgence of pleasures and in the gratification of vanity, but in the sanctification of their souls and in becoming saints. So many gifts of grace, so many divine lights, holy inspirations, loving calls, and so many years of life to repair past disorders. But they shall forever hear from the angel of the Lord that for them the time of salvation is past. The angel whom I saw standing swore by him that liveth forever and ever, that time shall be no longer. Apocalypse 10:6. Alas, what cruel swords shall all these blessings received from God be to the heart of a poor damned Christian, when he shall see himself shut up in the prison of hell, and that there is no more time to repair his eternal ruin. In despair, he will say to his wretched companions, "The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved." Jeremiah 8:20. The time, he will say, of gathering fruits of eternal life is past. The summer, during which we could have saved our souls, is over, but we are not saved. The winter is come, but it is eternal winter, in which we must live in misery and despair as long as God shall be God. "O fool," he will say, "that I have been! If I had suffered for God the pains to which I have submitted for the indulgence of my passions, if the labors which I have endured for my own damnation had been borne for my salvation, how happy should I now be! And what now remains of all past pleasures but remorse and pain, which now torture and shall torture me for eternity?" Finally, he will say, "I might be forever happy, and now I must be forever miserable." Ah, this thought will torture the damned more than the fire and all the torments of hell. Of the second remorse of the damned, arising from the remembrance of the trifles for which they lost their souls, Saul forbid the people under pain of death to taste food. His son Jonathan, who was then young, being hungry, tasted a little honey. Having discovered that Jonathan had violated the command, the king declared that he should die. Seeing himself condemned to death, Jonathan said with tears, "I did but taste a little honey, and behold, I must die." 1 Kings 14:43. But the people, moved to pity for Jonathan, interposed with his father, and delivered him from death. For the unhappy damned there is no compassion. There is no one to intercede with God to deliver them from the eternal death of hell. On the contrary, all rejoice at the just punishment which they suffer for having willfully lost God and paradise for the sake of a transitory pleasure. After having eaten the pottage of lentils, for which he sold his right of primogeniture, Esau was tortured with grief and remorse for what he had lost, and roared out with a great cry. Genesis 27:34. Oh, how great shall be the roaring and howling of the damned at the thought of having lost for a few poisonous and momentary pleasures the everlasting kingdom of paradise, and of being condemned for eternity to a continual death. The unfortunate reprobate shall be continually employed in reflecting on the unhappy cause of their damnation. To us who live on earth, our past life appears but a moment, but a dream. Alas, what will the 50 or 60 years which they may have spent in this world appear to the damned, when they shall find themselves in the abyss of eternity, and when they shall have passed 100 and 1,000 million years in torments, and shall see that their miserable eternity is only beginning, and shall be forever in its commencement? But have the 50 years spent on this earth been full of pleasures? Perhaps the sinner, living in enmity with God, enjoyed uninterrupted happiness in his sins. How long do the pleasures of sin last? Only for a few minutes. The remaining part of the lives of those who live at a distance from God is full of anguish and pain. Oh, what will these moments of pleasure appear to a damned soul, when she shall find herself in a pit of fire? What hath pride profited us? Or what advantage hath the boasting of riches brought us? All those things have passed away like a shadow. Wisdom 5:8. Unhappy me! Each of the damned shall say, I have lived on earth according to my corrupt inclinations. I have indulged my pleasures, but what have they profited me? They have lasted but for a short time. They have made me lead a life of bitterness and disquietude, and now I must burn in this furnace forever, in despair, and abandoned by all. Of the third remorse of the damned, arising from the knowledge of the great good which they have lost by their own fault. A certain queen, blinded by the ambition of being a sovereign, said one day, If the Lord gives me a reign of 40 years, I shall renounce paradise. The unhappy queen reigned for 40 years, but now that she is in another world, she cannot but be grieved at having made such a renunciation. Oh, how great must be her anguish at the thought of having lost the kingdom of paradise for the sake of a reign of 40 years, full of troubles, of crosses, and of fears. St. Peter Chrysologus says that to the damned the voluntary loss of paradise is a greater loss than the very pains of hell. The greatest pain in hell is the loss of God, that sovereign good, who is the source of all the joys of paradise. Let torments, says St. Bruno, be added to torments, and let them not be deprived of God. The damned would be content to have 1,000 hells added to the hell which they suffer, provided they were not deprived of God. But their hell shall consist in seeing themselves deprived forever of God through their own fault. Saint Teresa used to say that when a person loses through his own fault a trifle, a small sum of money, or a ring of little value, the thought of having lost it through his own neglect afflicts him and disturbs his peace. What then must be the anguish of the damned in reflecting that they have lost God, a good of infinite value, and have lost him through their own fault? The damned shall see that God wished them to be saved, and had given them the choice of eternal life or of eternal death. Before man is life and death. That which he shall choose shall be given to him. Ecclesiasticus 15:18. They shall see that, if they wished, they might have acquired eternal happiness, and that, by their own choice, they are damned. On the day of judgment, they shall see many of their companions among the elect, but because they would not put a stop to their career of sin, they have gone to end it in hell. Therefore we have erred. They shall say to their unhappy associates in hell, We have erred in losing heaven and God through our own fault, and our error is irreparable. They shall continually exclaim, There is no peace for my bones because of my sins. Psalm 37:4. The thought of having been the cause of their own damnation produces an internal pain which enters into the very bones of the damned, and prevents them from ever enjoying a moment's repose. Hence, each of them shall be to himself an object of the greatest horror. Each shall suffer the pain threatened by the Lord. I will set thee before thy face. Psalm 49:21. If, beloved brethren, you have hitherto been so foolish as to lose God for a miserable pleasure, do not persevere in your folly. Endeavor now that you have it in your power to repair your past error. Tremble. Perhaps if you do not now resolve to change your life, you shall be abandoned by God and be lost forever. When the devil tempts you, remember hell. The thought of hell will preserve you from that land of misery. I say, remember hell, and have recourse to Jesus Christ and to Most Holy Mary, and they will deliver you from sin, which is the gate of hell. End of Remorse of the Damned, a sermon by St. Alphonsus Liguori, narrated by Tony Capobianco. 19th Sunday after Pentecost, on the pain of loss which the damned suffer in hell. Cast him into the exterior darkness, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 22:13. According to all laws, divine and human, the punishment of crime should be proportioned to its grievousness. According to the measure of the sin shall the measure also of the stripes be. Deuteronomy 25:2. Now, the principal injury which sinners do to God by mortal sin consists in turning their back upon their Creator and their sovereign good. St. Thomas defines mortal sin to be a turning away from the immutable good. Of this injury the Lord complains in the following words: Thou hast forsaken me, saith the Lord. Thou hast gone backward. Jeremiah 15:6. Since then, the greatest guilt of the sinner consists in deliberately consenting to lose God, the loss of God shall constitute his greatest punishment in hell. There shall be weeping. In hell there is continual weeping. But what is the object of the bitterest tears of the unhappy damned? It is the thought of having lost God through their own fault. This shall be the subject of the present discourse. Be attentive, brethren. Know, dearly beloved Christians, the goods of the earth are not the end for which God has placed you in the world. The end for which he has created you is the attainment of eternal life, and the end life eternal. Romans 6:22. Eternal life consists in loving God and possessing him for eternity. Whosoever attains this end shall be forever happy. But he who, through his own fault, does not attain it, loses God. He shall be miserable for eternity, and shall weep forever, saying, My end is perished. Lamentations 3:18. The pain produced by loss is proportioned to the value of what has been lost. If a person lose a jewel, a diamond, worth 100 crowns, he feels great pain. If the diamond were worth 200 crowns, the pain is double. If worth 400, the pain is still greater. Now, I ask, what is the good which a damned soul has lost? She has lost God. She has lost an infinite good. The pain, then, arising from the loss of God, is an infinite pain. The pain of the damned, says St. Thomas, is infinite because it is the loss of an infinite good. Such, too, is the doctrine of St. Bernard, who says that the value of the loss of the damned is measured from the infinitude of God, the supreme good. Hence, hell does not consist in its devouring fire, nor in its intolerable stench, nor in the unceasing shrieks and howlings of the damned, nor in the terrific sight of the devils, nor in the narrowness of that pit of torments, in which the damned are thrown one over the other. The pain which constitutes hell is the loss of God. In comparison of this pain, all the other torments of hell are trifling. The reward of God's faithful servants in heaven is, as he said to Abraham, God himself. I am thy reward, exceeding great. Genesis 15:1. Hence, as God is the reward of the blessed in heaven, so the loss of God is the punishment of the damned in hell. Hence, St. Bruno has truly said that how great soever the torments which may be inflicted on the damned, they never can equal the great pain of being deprived of God. Add torments to torments, but do not deprive them of God. According to St. Chrysostom, 1,000 hells are not equal to this pain. God is so lovely that he deserves infinite love. He is so amiable that the saints in heaven are so replenished with joy and so absorbed in divine love that they desire nothing but to love God, and think only of loving him with all their strength. At present, sinners, for the sake of their vile pleasures, shut their eyes, and neither know God, nor the love which he deserves. But in hell they shall, in punishment of their sins, be made to know that God is an infinite good and infinitely amiable. The Lord shall be known when he executeth judgment. Psalm 9:17. The sinner, drowned in sensual pleasures, scarcely knows God. He sees him only in the dark, and therefore he disregards the loss of God. But in hell he shall know God, and shall be tormented forever by the thought of having voluntarily lost his infinite good. A certain Parisian doctor appeared after death to his bishop, and said that he was damned. His bishop asked him if he remembered the sciences which he was so well versed in this life. He answered that in hell the damned think only of the pain of having lost God. Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire. Matthew 25:41. Depart from me. This command constitutes the hell of the damned. Begone from me. You shall be no longer mine, and I shall be no longer yours. You are not my people, and I will not be yours. O.C. 1:9. At present, this punishment is, as St. Augustine says, dreaded only by the saints. It is a punishment which affrights the soul that loves God more than all the torments of hell. But it does not terrify sinners who are immersed in the darkness of sin. But at death they shall, for their greater chastisement, understand the infinite good which they have lost through their own fault. It is necessary to know that men have been created for God, and that nature draws them to love him. In this life, the darkness of sin and the earthly affections which reign in their hearts stifle their natural tendency and inclination to a union with God, their sovereign good. And therefore the thought of being separated from him does not produce much pain. But when the soul leaves the body and is freed from the senses, which keeps her in darkness, she then clearly sees that she has been created for God, and that he is the only good which can make her happy. But, says St. Antonin, the soul separated from the body understands that God is her sovereign good, and that she has been created for him. Hence, as soon as she is loosed from the bondage of the body, she rushes forward to embrace her supreme good, but because she is in sin and is his enemy, God will cast her off. Though driven back and chased away, she retains her invincible tendency and inclination to a union with God, and her hell shall consist in seeing herself always drawn to God and always banished from him. If a dog see a hare, what effort does he not make to break his chain and seize his prey? Thus, at her separation from the body, the natural inclinations of the soul draw her to God, while at the same time sin separates her from him, and drags her with it into hell. Sin, says the prophet, like a wall of immense thickness, is placed between the soul and God, and separates her from him. But your iniquities have divided between you and your God. Isaiah 59:2. Hence, the unhappy soul, confined in the prison of hell, at a distance from God, shall weep forever, saying, Then, my God, I shall be no longer thine, and thou wilt be no longer mine. I shall love thee no more, and thou wilt never again love me. This separation from God terrified David when he said, Will God then cast off forever, or will he never be more favorable again? Psalm 77:7. How great, he says, would be my misery if God should cast me from him, and never again be merciful to me. But this misery every damned soul in hell suffers, and shall suffer for eternity. As long as he remained in sin, David felt his conscience reproaching him and asking, "Where is thy God? David, where is thy God, who once loved thee? Thou hast lost him, he is no longer thine." David was so afflicted at the loss of his God that he wept night and day. My tears have been my bread day and night, whilst it has been said to me daily, "Where is thy God?" Psalm 42:4. Thus, even the devils will say to the damned, "Where is your God?" By his tears David appeased and recovered his God, but the damned shall shed an immense sea of tears, and shall never appease nor recover their God. St. Augustine says that if the damned saw the beauty of God, they should feel no pain, and hell itself would be converted into a paradise. But the damned shall never see God. When David forbade his son Absalom to appear in his presence, the sorrow of Absalom was so great that he entreated Joab to tell his father that he would rather be put to death than never more be permitted to see his face. I beseech thee, therefore, that I may see the face of the king, and if he be mindful of my iniquity, let him kill me. 2 Samuel 14:32. To a certain grandee who acted irreverently in the church, Philip II said, "Do not dare ever to appear again in my presence." So intense was the pain which the nobleman felt that, after having returned home, he died of grief. What, then, must be the feelings of the reprobate at the hour of death, when God shall say to them, "Begone, let me never see you again. You shall never more see my face. I will hide my face from them. All evils and afflictions shall find them." Deuteronomy 31:17. What sentiments of pity should we feel at seeing a son who was always united with his father, who always ate and slept with him, weeping over a parent whom he loved so tenderly, and saying, "My father, I have lost you. I shall never see you more." Ah, if we saw a damned soul weeping bitterly and asked her the cause of her wailing, she would answer, "I weep because I have lost God, and shall never see him again." The pain of the reprobate shall be increased by the knowledge of the glory which the saints enjoy in paradise, and from which they see, and shall forever see themselves excluded. How great would the pain which a person should feel if, after being invited by his sovereign to his own theatre to be present at the singing, dancing, and other amusements, he should be excluded in punishment of some fault. How bitter should be his anger and disappointment when, from without, he should hear the shouts of joy and applause within. At present, sinners despise heaven, and lose it for trifles, after Jesus Christ shed the last drop of his blood to make them worthy of entering into the happy kingdom. But when they shall be confined in hell, the knowledge of the glory of heaven shall be the greatest of all their torments. St. John Chrysostom says that to see themselves banished from that land of joy shall be to the damned a torment 10,000 times as great as the hell which they suffer. Oh, that I had at least the hope, the damned will say, that after 1,000 or even 1,000,000 of ages I could recover the divine grace and become worthy of entering into heaven, there to see God. But no, he shall be told, "When the wicked man is dead, there shall be no hope any more." Proverbs 11:7. When he was in this life, he could have saved his soul, but because he has died in sin, his loss is irreparable. Hence, with tears of despair, he shall say, "I shall not see the Lord God in the land of the living." Isaiah 38:11. The thought of having lost God and paradise solely through their own fault shall increase the torture of the damned. Every damned soul shall say, It was in my power to have led a life of happiness on earth by loving God, and to have acquired boundless happiness for eternity, but in consequence of having loved my vices, I must remain in this place of torments as long as God shall be God. She will then exclaim in the words of Job, "Who will grant me that I might be according to the months past, according to the days in which God kept me?" Job 39:2. Oh, that I were allowed to go back to the time I lived on earth, when God watched over me, that I might not fall into this fire. I did not live among the savages, the Indians, or the Chinese. I was not left without the sacraments, sermons, or masters to instruct me. I was born in the bosom of the true church, and have been well instructed and frequently admonished by preachers and confessors. To this prison I have not been dragged by the devils. I have come of my own accord. The chains by which I am bound and kept at a distance from God, I have forged with my own will. How often has God spoken to my heart and said to me, "Amend and return to me. Beware lest the time should come when thou shalt not be able to prevent thy destruction." Alas, this time has come. The sentence has been already passed. I am damned, and for my damnation there neither is nor shall be any remedy for all eternity. But if the damned soul has lost God and shall never see him again, perhaps she can at least love him. No, she has been abandoned by grace, and thus she is made the slave of her sins, and compelled to hate him. The damned see that God is their adversary, on account of their contempt for him during life, and are therefore always in despair. Why hast thou set me opposite to thee, and I am become burdensome to myself? Job 7:20. Hence, because the damned see that they are enemies of God, whom they at the same time know to be worthy of infinite love, they are to themselves objects of the greatest horror. The greatest of all the punishments which God shall inflict on them will consist in seeing that God is so amiable, and that they are so deformed, and the enemies of this God. I will set before thy face. Psalm 50:21. The sight of all that God has done for the damned shall above all increase their torture. The wicked shall see and shall be angry. Psalm 112:10. They shall see all the benefits which God bestowed upon them, all the lights and calls which he gave them, and the patience with which he waited for them. They shall, above all, see how much Jesus Christ has loved them, and how much he has suffered for the love of them. And after all his love and all his sufferings, they shall see that they are now objects of his hatred, and shall be no longer objects of his love. According to Saint Chrysostom, 1,000 hells are nothing compared with the thought of being hateful to Christ. Then the damned shall say, "My Redeemer, who through his compassion for me sweated blood, suffered an agony in the garden, and died on the cross bereft of all consolation, has now no pity on me. I weep, I cry out, but he no longer hears or looks to me. He is utterly forgetful of me. He once loved me, but now he hates and justly hates me, for I have ungratefully refused to love him." David says that the reprobate are thrown into the pit of death. Thou shalt bring them down into the pit of destruction. Psalm 55:23. Hence, St. Augustine has said, "The pit shall be closed on top, it shall be opened at the bottom, it shall be expanded downwards, and they who refuse to know God shall be no longer known by him." Thus the damned see that God deserves infinite love, and that they cannot love him. St. Catherine of Genoa, being one day assailed by the devil, asked him who he was. He answered with tears, "I am that wicked one who is deprived of the love of God. I am that miserable being that can never more love God." They not only cannot love God, but abandoned in their sins, they are forced to hate him. Their hell consists in hating God, whom they at the same time know to be infinitely amiable. They love him intensely as their sovereign good, and hate him as the avenger of their sins. Their natural love draws them continually to God, but their hatred drags them away from him. These two contrary passions, like two ferocious wild beasts, incessantly tear in pieces the hearts of the damned, and cause, and shall for all eternity cause, them to live in a continual death. The reprobate then shall hate and curse all the benefits which God has bestowed upon them. They shall hate the benefits of creation, redemption, and the sacraments. But they shall hate in a particular manner the sacrament of baptism, by which they have, on account of their sins, been made more guilty in the sight of God. The sacrament of penance, by which, if they wished, they could have so easily saved their souls, and above all, the most holy sacrament of the altar, in which God had given himself entirely to them. They shall consequently hate all the other means which have been helps to their salvation. Hence, they shall hate and curse all the angels and saints, but they shall curse particularly their guardian angels, their special advocates, and, above all, the Divine Mother Mary. They shall curse the three divine persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, but particularly Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word, who suffered so much and died for their salvation. They shall curse the wounds of Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus Christ, and the death of Jesus Christ. Behold, the end to which accursed sin leads the souls which Jesus Christ has dearly bought. End of Sermon by St. Alphonsus Liguori, narrated by Tony Capobianco. This sermon is from the 5th Sunday after the Epiphany, on the pains of hell. Gather up first the cockle, and bind into bundles to burn. Matthew 13:30. I shall first speak of the fire, which is the principal pain that torments the senses of the damned, and afterwards of the other pains of hell. Behold, the final doom of sinners who abuse the divine mercy is to burn in the fire of hell. God threatens hell not to send us there, but to deliver us from that place of torments. Remember then, brethren, that God gives you today the opportunity of hearing this sermon, that you may be preserved from hell, and that you may give up sin, which alone can lead you to hell. My brethren, it is certain and of faith that there is a hell. After judgment, the just shall enjoy the eternal glory of paradise, and sinners shall be condemned to suffer the everlasting chastisement reserved for them in hell. And these shall go into everlasting punishment, but the just into life everlasting. Matthew 25:46. Let us examine in what hell consists. It is what the rich glutton called it, a place of torments. It is a place of suffering, where each of the senses and powers of the damned has its proper torment, and in which the torments of each person will be increased in proportion to the forbidden pleasures in which he indulged. As much as she hath glorified herself and lived in delicacies, so much torment and sorrow give ye to her. Apocalypse 18:7. In offending God, the sinner does two evils. He abandons God, the sovereign good, who is able to make him happy, and turns to creatures who are incapable of giving any real happiness to the soul. Of this injury which men commit against him, the Lord complains by his prophet Jeremiah. For my people have done two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have digged to themselves cisterns, broken cisterns, that can hold no water. Jeremiah 2:13. Since then the sinner turns his back on God, he shall be tormented in hell by the pain arising from the loss of God, of which I shall speak on another occasion. See the sermon for the 19th Sunday after Pentecost. And since, in offending God, he turns to creatures, he shall be justly tormented by the same creatures, and principally by fire. The vengeance on the flesh of the ungodly is fire and worms. Ecclesiasticus 7:19. Fire and remorse of conscience are the principal means by which God takes vengeance on the flesh of the wicked. Hence, in condemning the reprobate to hell, Jesus Christ commands them to go into eternal fire. Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire. Matthew 25:41. This fire, then, shall be one of the most cruel executioners of the damned. Even in this life, the pain of fire is the most terrible of all torments. But St. Augustine says that in comparison of the fire of hell, the fire of this earth is no more than a picture compared with the reality. Anselm teaches that the fire of hell as far surpasses the fire of this world as the fire of the real exceeds that of painted fire. The pain, then, produced by the fire of hell is far greater than that which is produced by our fire, because God has made the fire of this earth for the use of man, but he has created the fire of hell purposely for the chastisement of sinners, and therefore, as Tertullian says, he has made it a minister of his justice. This avenging fire is always kept alive by the wrath of God. A fire is kindled in my rage, Jeremiah 15:14. And the rich man also died, and he was buried in hell, Luke 16:22. The damned are buried in the fire of hell. Hence, they have an abyss of fire below, an abyss of fire above, and an abyss of fire on every side. As a fish in the sea is surrounded by water, so the unhappy reprobate are encompassed by fire on every side. The sharpness of the pain of fire may be inferred from the circumstance that the rich glutton complained of no other torment. I am tormented in this flame. The prophet Isaiah says that the Lord will punish the guilt of sinners with the spirit of fire. If the Lord shall wash away the filth of the daughters of Sion by the spirit of burning. Isaiah 4:4. The spirit of burning is the pure essence of fire. All spirits or essences, though taken from simple herbs or flowers, are so penetrating that they reach the very bones. Such is the fire of hell. Its activity is so great that a single spark of it would be sufficient to melt a mountain of bronze. The disciple relates that a damned person who appeared to a religious dipped his hand into a vessel of water. The religious placed in the vessel a candlestick of bronze, which was instantly dissolved. This fire shall torment the damned not only externally, but also internally. It will burn the bowels, the heart, the brains, the blood within the veins, and the marrow within the bones. The skin of the damned shall be like a cauldron, in which their bowels, their flesh, and their bones shall be burned. David says that the bodies of the damned shall be like so many furnaces of fire. Thou shalt make them as an oven of fire in the time of thy anger. Psalm 20:10. O God, certain sinners cannot bear to walk under a strong sun, or to remain before a large fire in a closed room. They cannot endure a spark from a candle, and they fear not the fire of hell, which, according to the prophet Isaiah, not only burns, but devours the unhappy damned. Which of you can dwell with devouring fire? Isaiah 33:14. As a lion devours a lamb, so the fire of hell devours the reprobate, but it devours without destroying life, and thus tortures them with a continual death. Continue, says St. Peter Damian to the sinner who indulges in impurity. Continue to satisfy your flesh. A day will come, or rather an eternal night, when your impurities, like pitch, shall nourish a fire within your very bowels. And according to Saint Cyprian, the impurities of the wicked shall boil in the very fat which will issue from their accursed bodies. Saint Jerome teaches that in this fire sinners shall suffer not only the pain of the fire, but also all the pains which men endure on this earth. How manifold are the pains to which men are subject in this life! Pains in the sides, pains in the head, pains in the loins, pains in the bowels, all these together torture the damned. The fire itself will bring with it the pain of darkness, for by its smoke it will, according to St. John, produce a storm of darkness, which shall blind the damned. To whom the storm of darkness is reserved forever. St. Jude 13. Hence, hell is called a land of darkness covered with the shadow of death. A land that is dark and covered with the mist of death, a land of misery and darkness, where the shadow of death and no order but everlasting horror dwelleth. Job 10:21-22. To hear that a criminal is shut up in a dungeon for 10 or 20 years excites our compassion. Hell is a dungeon closed on every side, into which a ray of the sun or the light of a candle never enters. Thus the damned shall never see light. Psalm 48:20. The fire of this world gives light, but the fire of hell is utter darkness. In explaining the words of David, the voice of the Lord divideth the flame of fire. Psalm 28:7. Saint Basil says that in hell the Lord separates the fire that burns from the flame which illuminates, and therefore this fire burns but gives no light. Albertus Magnus explains this passage more concisely by saying that God divides the heat from the light. St. Thomas teaches that in hell there is only so much light as is necessary to torment the damned by the sight of their associates and of the devils. And according to St. Augustine, the bare sight of these infernal monsters excites sufficient terror to cause the death of all the damned, if they were capable of dying. To suffer a parching thirst without having a drop of water to quench it is intolerably painful. It has sometimes happened that travelers who could procure no refreshment after a long journey have fainted from the pain produced by thirst. So great is the thirst of the damned that if one of them were offered all the water on this earth, he would exclaim, "All this water is not sufficient to extinguish the burning thirst which I endure." But alas, the unhappy damned shall never have a single drop of water to refresh their tongues. He cried out and said, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water to cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame." St. Luke 16:24. The rich glutton has not obtained, and shall never obtain, this drop of water as long as God shall be God. The reprobate shall likewise be tormented by the stench which pervades hell. The stench shall arise from the very bodies of the damned. Out of their carcasses shall arise a stink. Isaiah 34:3. The bodies of the damned are called carcasses, not because they are dead, for they are living, and shall be forever alive to pain, but on account of the stench which they exhale. Would it not be very painful to be shut up in a close room with a fetid corpse? St. Bonaventure says that if the body of one of the damned were placed in the earth, it would, by its stench, be sufficient to cause the death of all men. How intolerable, then, must it be to live forever in the dungeons of hell, in the midst of the immense multitudes of the damned. Some foolish worldlings say, "If I go to hell, I shall not be there alone." Miserable fools! Do you not see that the greater the number of your companions, the more insufferable shall be your torments? There, says St. Thomas, the society of the reprobate shall cause an increase and not a diminution of misery. The society of the reprobate augments their misery, because each of the damned is a source of suffering to all the others. Hence, the greater their number, the more they shall mutually torment each other. And the people, says the prophet Isaiah, shall be ashes after a fire, as a bundle of thorns, they shall be burnt with fire. Isaiah 33:12. Placed in the midst of the furnace of hell, the damned are like so many grains reduced to ashes by that abyss of fire, and like so many thorns tied together and wounding each other. They are tormented not only by the stench of their companions, but also by their shrieks and lamentations. How painful it is to a person longing for sleep to hear the groans of a sick man, the barking of a dog, or the screams of an infant. The damned must listen incessantly to the wailing and howling of their associates, not for a night, nor for 1,000 nights, but for all eternity, without the interruption of a single moment. The damned are also tormented by the narrowness of the place in which they are confined. For although the dungeon of hell is large, it will be too small for so many millions of the reprobate, who, like sheep, shall be heaped one over the other. They are, says David, laid in hell like sheep. Psalm 48:15. We learn from the Scriptures that they shall be pressed together like grapes in the winepress, by the vengeance of an angry God. The winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of God the Almighty. Apocalypse 19:15. From this pressure shall arise the pain of immobility. Let them become unmovable as a stone. Exodus 16:16. In whatever position the damned shall fall into hell after the general judgment, whether on the side, or on the back, or with the head downwards, in that they must remain for eternity, without being ever able to move foot or hand or finger, as long as God shall be God. In a word, St. Chrysostom says that all the pains of this life, however great they may be, are scarcely a shadow of the torments of the damned. The reprobate, then, shall be tormented in all the senses of the body. They shall also be tormented in all the powers of the soul. Their memory shall be tormented by the remembrance of the years which they had received from God for the salvation of their souls, and which they spent in laboring for their own damnation, by the remembrance of so many graces and so many divine lights which they abused. Their understanding shall be tormented by the knowledge of the great happiness which they forfeited in losing their souls, heaven and God, and by a conviction that this loss is irreparable. Their will shall be tormented by seeing that whatsoever they ask or desire shall be refused. The desire of the wicked shall perish. Psalm 111:10. They shall never have any of those things for which they wish, and must forever suffer all that is repugnant to their will. They would wish to escape from these torments and to find peace. But in these torments they must forever remain, and peace they shall never enjoy. Perhaps they may sometimes receive a little comfort, or at least enjoy occasional repose. No, says Cyprian. In this life, how great soever may be the tribulations which we suffer, there is always some relief or interruption. The damned must remain forever in a pit of fire, always in torture, always weeping, without ever enjoying a moment's repose. But perhaps there is someone to pity their sufferings. At the very time that they are so much afflicted, the devils continually reproach them with the sins for which they are tormented, saying, "Suffer, burn, live forever in despair. You yourselves have been the cause of your destruction." And do not the saints, the Divine Mother, and God, who is called the Father of mercies, take compassion on their miseries? No. The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Matthew 26:29. The saints, represented by the stars, not only do not pity the damned, but they even rejoice in the vengeance inflicted on the injuries offered to their God. Neither can the Divine Mother pity them, because they hate her Son, and Jesus Christ, who died for the love of them, cannot pity them, because they have despised his love and have voluntarily brought themselves to perdition. End of St. Alphonsus Liguori's sermon on the pains of hell, narrated by Tony Capobianco. This has been a Virgo Potens production. Welcome to the Virgo Potens YouTube channel. If you enjoy this video, give it a like. I also invite you to subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss new content. Please prayerfully consider supporting my work by becoming a patron of Virgo Potens on Patreon and/or by buying one of my books. My ebooks are available on Amazon as well as on the Apple Bookstore. For those who prefer a physical copy rather than an ebook, my book, Spiritual Warfare, Know Thy Enemy, is also available as a paperback on Amazon. If you are interested in making a one-time contribution, I suggest that you do so by simply buying one of my books. I am thankful for your support. Links to Patreon and to my books will be posted in the comments section of this video. The continuation of this work isn't possible without you. Lastly, and most importantly, please pray for me. May the Virgin Most Powerful guide and protect you.